This was a young woman murdered in broad daylight.
Joshua Stimpson claimed he was suffering from a mental condition, but the jury said it was murder.
Joshua Stimpson goes into the gym. Joshua Stimpson was following Molly.
Molly sent me a message with a picture of Josh, saying that he'd turned up at the gym.
He yanked the door of her car open, jumped in and started stabbing her.
Stabbing and slashing at her more than 50 times.
There was blood up the windows. It was clear she was still inside.
It never starts the way people imagine. Not with something obvious, not with fear, not with a moment where everything suddenly feels wrong. It starts quietly, almost unnoticed, with something that feels completely normal, something you wouldn't think twice about. A message, a name, a conversation that flows easily. And somewhere in the background there is a feeling, small, almost invisible, something that doesn't fully sit right, but it disappears just as quickly as it comes, and you ignore it, because nothing has actually happened yet. There is no clear danger, no reason to react, just a moment that feels slightly off, and moments like that are easy to dismiss. What kind of feeling appears at the beginning that people tend to ignore? Molly McLaren was not someone who blended into the background. She didn't need to try to stand out. She just did, naturally, without effort. She had a kind of energy that people noticed immediately, the kind that made you feel comfortable the moment you were around her.
Get to the same bit every day. I feel like I'm lagging. Everyone gets that bit.
At university, she quickly became known, not because she was loud or attention-seeking, but because she was genuine. She walked into lectures with a coffee in her hand, smiling, talking, asking questions, laughing, bringing a kind of lightness into the room that people remembered. And it wasn't forced. It was just who she was. She was driven, focused, studying health and fitness, building something for herself, not just academically, but personally. She had direction. She knew where she wanted to go, and she was willing to work for it. Fitness wasn't just something she studied, it was part of her identity. Early mornings, intense workouts, routines that required discipline. And what made her different was that she didn't pretend it was easy. She talked about the struggle, about the moments where everything feels heavy, where your body tells you to stop and your mind starts to agree. That point where most people give up, everyone gets there, she would say, and that's the moment that matters. And people connected with that because it was honest. What qualities made Molly stand out and connect with people at university? She shared that part of her life online, posting workouts, thoughts, routines, and slowly people started following her, not because she was perfect, but because she was real. She showed effort, setbacks, progress, the full picture, and that made her relatable, made her someone people trusted, even if they had never met her. At university, she built a close group of friends quickly, people who were drawn to her personality, her humor, the way she could turn even ordinary moments into something memorable. They trained together, studied together, went out together, and for them, it wasn't about doing something extraordinary all the time. It was about the small moments, the routines, the shared experiences. And Molly was always at the center of that, always the one bringing energy into the group. But behind all of that, behind the confidence, the positivity, the motivation, there were things people didn't see, struggles she had dealt with for years, personal battles that had shaped her in ways that weren't visible on the surface, things she had worked through quietly, rebuilding herself step by step. And by this point in her life, she had reached a place where she felt in control again, where she felt like she was moving forward. And then, like so many people her age, she turned to dating apps. That's where she met him, Joshua Stimpson. At first, there was nothing unusual about him, nothing that stood out in a negative way. He seemed normal, maybe a little reserved, but attentive, interested, easy to talk to. They started messaging, and the conversation flowed naturally. He replied quickly, asked questions, showed interest in her life, her routine, her goals. And over time, those conversations became longer, more personal, more familiar. They shared experiences, thoughts, things that created a sense of connection. By the time they met in person, it didn't feel like meeting a stranger. It felt like continuing something that had already begun, something that already had a foundation. And the early stages of the relationship felt normal, easy, natural. They spent time together, went out, talked for hours. He became part of her routine quickly, joining her at the gym, spending evenings together, integrating into her life faster than most people would. But at the time, that didn't feel strange. It felt like things were just progressing. He opened up about his own struggles, talking about anxiety, about difficult experiences, and that created a deeper connection. Because when someone shares that side of themselves, you don't step away, you move closer, you trust them more.
That he'd had some mental health issues himself, and she said so they could sort of help each other.
And Molly was exactly that kind of person. Someone who cared deeply, someone who wanted to help, someone who believed in supporting people through difficult moments. But change doesn't happen all at once. It happens slowly, almost invisibly. At first, it was small things, questions that seemed normal. Where are you? Who are you with? What are you doing later? At first, it felt like interest, like someone who cared. But then it became more frequent, more persistent, more expected. And if she didn't reply quickly, there was tension, subtle at first, then more noticeable. If she made plans without him, there was frustration, questions, pressure. What small changes in Joshua's behavior begin to show signs of control? Still, nothing extreme, nothing that clearly crossed a line. Just moments, small moments. And moments like that are easy to ignore, easy to explain away. Then came the unannounced appearances. He would show up places she hadn't invited him to. Situations that were supposed to be hers suddenly weren't anymore. At first, it felt like coincidence, something that just happened. But when it kept happening, it started to feel different, less random, more intentional. Her friends noticed it before she fully did.
He would tell her that, he needed to be there for her, and
Something about him didn't feel right. He wasn't openly aggressive, not in a way that was obvious, but there was something beneath the surface, something controlling, something that changed the atmosphere whenever he was around. Conversations felt different. Tension that didn't quite have a clear source, but was always there. And slowly, without realizing it, Molly started adjusting. That's how it works. Not through force, through pressure, through subtle shifts that make you question yourself, that make you feel responsible for someone else's emotions. Until one day, something inside her shifted. That quiet feeling from the beginning came back, stronger, now, impossible to ignore. And this time, she listened. She ended the relationship. For her, it was about taking control back, about creating distance, about breathing again, about moving forward. But for him, this wasn't the end. This was where everything really started. At first, it didn't feel like danger. That's what makes situations like this so difficult to recognize while you're inside them, because nothing begins in a way that clearly tells you something is wrong. Nothing starts with fear. Nothing starts with violence. It starts with pressure, quiet, constant pressure that slowly builds in the background until it becomes impossible to ignore. The messages started almost immediately after she ended it. At first, they weren't aggressive. They weren't threatening. They were emotional. Long messages, repeated messages, messages that kept coming even when there was no reply. Please, talk to me. We can fix this. You don't understand. I need you. And that kind of message is difficult because it doesn't feel dangerous. It feels personal. It feels like someone struggling, someone reaching out. And that creates hesitation. It makes you pause. It makes you question your decision because you don't want to be the reason someone is hurting. But when she didn't respond the way he wanted, when she didn't go back, when she stayed firm, the tone changed. Not slowly, quickly, suddenly. The messages became sharper, colder, more aggressive. You've ruined everything. This is your fault. You can't just leave me like this. You owe me. And then came the guilt. Layered, persistent, repeated. You said you cared. You said you understood me. You said you would help me. Now you're abandoning me. And this is where control really starts to show, because it's no longer about connection. It's no longer about feelings. It becomes about power, about pulling someone back in, about making them feel responsible for your emotions, your actions, your state of mind. Molly tried to cut it off completely. She blocked him, removed him, created distance, tried to move forward. But he didn't stop. He adapted. When one door closed, he found another. And this is where everything started to shift into something much darker. Social media became his tool. At first, it was indirect. Posts that didn't mention her name. Things that could be interpreted in different ways. Things that made you think, but didn't confirm anything. But then it became personal, direct, targeted. He started posting about her, revealing private details, twisting conversations, taking moments out of context, reshaping reality in a way that made her look like the problem. After the breakup, how did Joshua continue to contact and target Molly? And he didn't do it quietly. He made sure people saw it. Friends, family, anyone connected to her. He tagged people, shared things publicly, forced attention onto it. And this is where it changes from harassment to humiliation. Public, calculated, deliberate, designed to hurt, designed to isolate, designed to take control in a different way. For someone like Molly, who had built a positive presence online, who had shared her fitness journey, her mindset, her routines, this hit differently because it wasn't just personal anymore. It was public. Everything she had built was being targeted, questioned, attacked, and even when she blocked him, it didn't stop. Because blocking someone only works if they respect boundaries, and he didn't. New accounts, fake profiles, indirect contact, people he could use, people he could manipulate, anyone who could give him access. And slowly, without her fully realizing it, at first he started tracking her. Every post, every location, every story, every small detail. What felt normal to share became information. What felt harmless became a map, and he followed it. Then came the moments that didn't make sense. Seeing him in places he shouldn't be. Running into him at times that felt too precise. Moments that felt slightly off, but not enough to prove anything. And that's the most dangerous part, because the human instinct is to doubt yourself, to explain it away, to tell yourself it's coincidence, because the alternative is terrifying. The idea that someone is watching, tracking, and planning. That changes everything. And people don't want to believe that. Not at first. But her friends started to see it clearly. The pattern, the repetition, the timing. This wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. This was intentional. This was stalking. The same behavior repeating again and again. The same presence appearing where it shouldn't be. The same person showing up at the wrong time too often. And by this point, the feeling had changed. It wasn't discomfort anymore, Dot. It wasn't uncertainty. It was fear. Real fear. Clear and undeniable. Molly knew something wasn't right now. She couldn't ignore it anymore. She couldn't explain it away anymore. So she went to the police. She took everything. Messages, screenshots, posts, evidence, proof of what had been happening. And she asked for help. Because at this point, it wasn't just emotional anymore. It felt dangerous. But the response wasn't what she needed. a warning, a phone call, a request for him to take things down. That was it. And when he was contacted, his reaction said everything detached, almost amused, like there would be no consequences, like nothing could stop him. And when someone believes that they escalate, and that's exactly what happened, he showed up again. Another night, another normal situation. Friends, drinks, music, a moment that should have felt safe. And then he was there, not invited, not expected, just there, walking through the same space, watching, making sure she saw him. He didn't need to say anything. He didn't need to approach. The presence alone was enough, because now it wasn't coincidence anymore. Now it was clear, and the atmosphere changed instantly. What had been normal felt tense, uncomfortable, unpredictable. Her friends felt it too. This wasn't right. This wasn't normal. But even then, there was still a small part of hope, the idea that maybe it would stop, that maybe he would lose interest, that maybe this was the worst of it. But patterns like this don't stop. They build, they grow, they escalate, and by now everything was already in motion. The control, the obsession, the need to stay connected no matter what. And the next day would prove just how far it had gone. The next morning didn't feel different. And that's the part that stays with people. Because there was no clear warning, no moment where everything suddenly shifted, no sign that something irreversible was about to happen. It was just another day, another routine, something familiar, something that should have been safe. Molly woke up early, got ready, left the house. Everything about that morning followed the same pattern as so many mornings before. The same movements, the same thoughts, the same routine that had always given her structure. Something she could rely on, something that grounded her, especially after the tension of the past days. And she went to the gym. For her, that place meant control. It meant discipline. It meant focus. It was one of the few places where everything made sense, where effort led to progress, where pushing through something difficult had a clear outcome. And after everything that had been happening, the messages, the pressure, the stress, this was supposed to be normal again, a reset, a way to clear her mind. It was early, quiet, almost empty. The kind of quiet that feels peaceful, the kind of quiet that makes you believe everything is okay again. She started her workout, moving through her routine, focusing on her breathing, on her form, on each repetition, trying to get back into that mindset she knew so well, pushing through, staying in control, telling herself that everything was fine, that things were settling down, that she could move on. And for a moment it worked. For a moment everything felt normal again. And then he walked in. The second time in less than 24 hours. Different place, same person. And in that moment, everything changed. Because now there was no doubt, no uncertainty, no explanation left. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't random. This wasn't bad timing. This was deliberate. What realization does Molly have when Joshua appears again at the gym? And she felt it immediately. That instinct, that feeling she had pushed aside before. Now it was clear, sharp, impossible to ignore. Something was wrong. Something was seriously wrong. She stopped, looked at him, tried to process what she was seeing, tried to make sense of it, but there was no way to make sense of it. He shouldn't have been there. There was no reason for him to be there. Except one. He had followed her. And once you realize that everything shifts, because the situation stops being uncomfortable and becomes dangerous. She reached for her phone, hands slightly shaking, typing quickly, messaging her friend, sending a photo, trying to explain, trying to understand. He's here, again, And the response came instantly. Questions, concern, urgency. How does he know? Did you post anything? Did anyone tell him? And the answer was no.
And she went, Mum, he's just turned up. He's just turned up at the gym.
Nothing had been shared. Nothing had been posted. No one knew she was there, which meant he didn't need to know. He just needed to follow. That realization changes everything, because it means this isn't random anymore. It means it's intentional, planned, controlled. And that's when fear sets in. Not confusion, not doubt. Real fear. Heavy, clear, unavoidable. She tried to stay calm, tried not to show it, tried to keep control over the situation. She approached him, asked a simple question. Why aren't you at work? Trying to sound normal, trying to keep it casual, trying to understand. But his response was cold, dismissive, like the question didn't matter, like he didn't owe her anything, like being there was completely normal, like nothing about this situation was wrong. And that response made it worse, because it showed something. A lack of boundaries, a lack of awareness, a lack of consequence. And then he left, just turned around, walked out, like nothing had happened. And for a moment there was relief, a brief moment, fragile, uncertain. Maybe it was over. Maybe he was gone. Maybe she could just leave and go home. But something still didn't feel right. That instinct again. Stronger now. Louder. Her friend told her to leave. Immediately. Her mother said the same thing. Don't stay. Don't wait. Just go. And she listened. She gathered her things. Moved quickly. Trying to stay calm. Trying not to panic. Trying to keep control. Telling herself it was fine. That she was leaving. That nothing would happen. But what she didn't know was that he hadn't left. He was outside. In the car park. Waiting. Watching. The car park was quiet. Almost empty. The kind of place where nothing happens. The kind of place where you don't expect danger. She walked toward her car. Step by step. Phone still in her hand. Messages still open. People telling her to be careful. To leave. To stay safe. She thought she was about to go home. She thought she was getting out. She thought she was safe. And then everything changed. In seconds. No warning. No time to react. No time to process. Just a moment that ended everything. And after that, there is no clear sequence anymore.
Joshua Stimpson launched a brutal and frenzied attack on Molly McLaren.
No clean timeline. Just fragments. Shock. Confusion. Silence where there should have been answers. Messages that stopped. Calls that didn't go through. And then slowly the realization begins. Heavy. Unreal. Impossible to fully accept. Because the mind refuses it at first. It searches for alternatives, for explanations, for anything that makes more sense than the truth. But the truth doesn't change. And for the people around her, it didn't feel real. Not at first. It couldn't be. Someone like Molly, someone so full of life, so driven, so present, doesn't just disappear like that. Doesn't just become part of a headline, part of a story. Something people talk about in past tense. But that's exactly what happened. And when everything is looked at again, every message, every moment, every coincidence, every feeling that something wasn't right, a pattern becomes clear. Not one moment, not one sudden act, but a progression. Slow, consistent, building over time. Control, manipulation, obsession, escalation. And the most disturbing part is how normal it all looked in the beginning. How easy it was to ignore. How easy it was to explain away. How easy it was to believe it wasn't serious, until it was. And sometimes that quiet voice in the back of your mind, the one that tells you something isn't right, the one you almost ignore, is the only warning you ever get.